Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Logisim webinar. My name is Joe Lombardo, and I'm the Logisim editor. And my co-host today, I'm pleased to welcome the president of the Logistics and Supply Chain Management Society, Dr. Ramon Krishna. The topic of our webinar is a very interesting one today and very appropriate to our times. It's about technology partnerships that help you maintain a high-performing supply chain. And it's a great pleasure to welcome our guests. We have Richard Ryan from Blue Yonder. Richard is the Senior Industry Strategy Advisor. And from Smartlinks, we have the CEO and founder, Mr. Vineet Kumar. And we also have Mr. Amlan Bose, who's the COO and Senior Vice President for Smartlinks. Gentlemen, welcome to this webinar. It's a great pleasure to see you all, and thank you for joining us. So let us start off by basically introducing our panel. Gentlemen, if you'd just like to share with us a moment, a brief outline of your background experience and some of the key strategic achievements in your career to date. Let me invite Richard to start off the discussion.
Good morning, everybody. Richard Ryan, based in Singapore for the past 15 years. And most of my career here in Singapore has been working with logistics and 3PL companies across the region.
Thank you, Richard. Vineet, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. This is Vineet Kumar. I am CEO and co-founder of Smartlinks. Smartlinks is a Blue Yonder focused consulting company. Prior to starting Smartlinks, I was part of Blue Yonder leading the logistics consulting practice, close to 18 years of experience in supply chain and logistics.
Excellent. Thank you, Vineet. Amlan, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hey, yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon to all the viewers. Thanks for joining in. So I'm Amlan Bose. I very recently moved and joined hands with Vineet in the Smartlinks. Prior to that, almost 2 decades, more than 2 decades, I have been working with Ford Motor Company and pretty much an automobile logistics and supply chain person, worked across Asia Pacific, Europe and US regions. Very pleased to be part of this conference.
Thank you, gentlemen. Excellent. I mean, we have a lot of experience and knowledge in this panel. So let me start off by asking you, Richard, and then I'll ask Vineet as well, is that we have many challenges today in our industry. What are the challenges facing your organization today in general? If you could just share with us some of the key concerns that you have.
I think everyone is struggling with the new normal, but I think from our side, one of the things that we have been struggling a lot is how do you reach our customers when you cannot travel? And that's where we see a lot of the partnerships coming in place very, very heavy. We've been surprisingly successful doing projects that a year ago, Joe, I would have told you impossible to be done. They're happening. The world is readapting itself, but I think a key element of that is being able to extend our reach through partners, because that means that we don't have to physically travel. We have local people that understand the local language, understand the local customs, but they are aligned with our objectives, so we work very closely together.
Right, excellent. Now that's very interesting, Richard, because in fact, because we're all in the same boat, we can't travel, we all have the same challenges, and therefore we all have to adapt in the same new norm. Vineet, what is your take on this? Because clearly you are also, as a provider, having the same stresses and pains.
Yeah, so there has been I would say, a collaboration challenge, as Richard was pointing out, right? When COVID started, the initial phase of that was a phase when we were trying to learn how to collaborate better.
Right.
And then we figured out, right, being local helps here in terms of collaboration. Being on the ground, right, I could still move within the city at certain points in time. So I could meet customers, Blue Yonder customers, and represent Blue Yonder as a Blue Yonder partner as well. So those were the ways we overcame the challenge. From a perspective of our organization, what we feel is that the process of ideation that happens with the customer, which is more better if we are face to face, that challenge remains as such. We have worked around it, or we are trying to work around it by having more conferences or more meetings. There is some loss of productivity, but what I'm seeing now is that people are getting used to that. And we are also making up for that loss of productivity by not being, that there is no need to travel. I would initially have a 2-day travel time. That's all gone. So I can focus more on the work part of it. But I do really miss meeting customers and meeting the team, which we used to create a different environment of sorts in terms of, if you look at things like ideation and other things.
Clearly, Vineet, adjusting to this condition is not easy because it's something everyone's been caught by surprise. But you think that once people are adjusted and retuned to this new reality, that productivity will improve and the relationships will reset themselves?
Yes. It will unleash productivity efficiencies as well, right? As I said, right, travel time. So if I were to travel to Singapore, I would have easily lost 1 day of productive time. Right. And that particular time now can be used in actually talking to customer or thinking about the customer problem. So there is a give and a take from that.
Rebalancing, that's great. Okay, so our topic is about partnerships for performance and how we're going to leverage on this, on partnerships. So Amlan, can I ask you, basically, what are the fundamentals of a good partnership when dealing with clients and suppliers, given all the constraints and conditions we have, and what we are doing to forge ahead?
Very good question. Joe, the partnership, typical partnership that we have been used to working in the industry, be it in the application sector, IT solutions, or any other, be it in logistics, 3PL or 4PL, we have always looked at it as a symbiotic relationship, and both the organizations benefit from each other. But what post-COVID, what we are seeing is, as Vineet was also touching upon it, that because we are not able to go and see and meet face-to-face and kind of empathize with their issues, problems, grievances, being there, right there, the critical need for a solution provider to actually penetrate a customer's ecosystem, their actual understanding the grievances and being part of one kind of symbiotic integrated organization, that need is being felt jointly by both sides. When we were doing projects in my earlier organizations, I used to call something as embedded partners. That means a partner is sitting right next to you, so that you don't have to tell him about your problems and grievances, but he's part and daily in and out of daily morning meetings, and he understands what you're going through, and he on his own comes out with a solution. The same thing can it be done through the conferences and audio and reaching out. But the mindset is that of how can I penetrate the minds and hearts and the problems and grievances of the customer. If, as a solution provider, as a partner, if I can always have that in the back of my mind, I think COVID, no COVID, travel, no travel, I will always be able to add more value to the to my client.
That's a good point, Amlan. But if you have an existing customer who you know and you've met face to face, it makes sense. You can actually have a continuity in a different format. But how do you manage new customers? How do you penetrate the barrier of new customers who you don't know, who you've never met face to face, or you've met them in a very different environment, and now you're trying to run this new model in this constrained environment? How would that be different to your approach?
Yeah, trust me, the human mind and the brain is so adaptive, and the survival skills are so natural to us. I have been recruited by my boss over the phone, even though we haven't met in the last 6 months. So if I can convince myself to such an extent that he could recruit me, he's right here. So I would be able to sell a project. So no, because COVID is the best thing. Unfortunately, the thing about COVID is it is a great equalizer. So everyone, be it a customer or the provider, everyone feels that, yes, I know you won't be able to come to me, but is there any way that you can reach out to me and you can understand me? And then when in past you have delivered, in the last 6 to 8 months, you have delivered projects, gone online remotely. And when you tell that story to the customer, you gain his confidence. And the customer also knows that this is the new normal. You have to follow that.
Okay, that's great. So Vineet, a testament to your ability to work offline and the constraints. But coming back to the fundamentals of partnership, what are the key objectives that you keep in mind when addressing client solutions and rebalancing the partnerships between you and your customers, your clients?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and is one of the challenges that we face day in, day out, right? So let me kind of bring out an example out here. Now, if you look at Blue Yonder products, right, they can be applied globally. And that's where the Blue Yonder strengths are. But if you go on to a particular client, there may be a very specific requirement which is very specific to that client, which is local to that area of work that we are looking at and is important for the client. So now here the challenge becomes, right, do we go ahead and ask Blue Yonder to kind of modify the product in order to meet the client requirements, which can be very specific, or we kind of go ahead and convince the client that this requirement is not that important for you because it's not there in the product for a very right reason. Now that's where the balancing act comes into play. Certain scenarios, right, it's important for the client to have that feature and functionality because of local regulatory laws or local elements that the client is facing, and that's where the empathy part of it comes into picture. So right. It's a very strong, I would say, a balancing act which we kind of try to figure out how to do best. There are times when we convince Blue Yonder in spirit of partnership that if this functionality or if this set of functionality is built into the product, it's good for the region. The other elements that we kind of try to do, right, in order to balance and meet the customer requirements is then build on top of Blue Yonder products. Right. So that's one way of doing it. But then there is another segment where we convince the client that maybe there is no need for that particular functionality. So I would say there is a segmented approach to that where we let client know versus a Blue Yonder product in solving those problems. So that's how we kind of end up balancing. So there is a segmented approach that we use.
So the rebalancing is a very, very fine act, basically. This is what the new challenge is about. So Richard, you've heard Amlan and Vineet talk about this, but how would you establish these key points up front in the relationship to avoid a breakdown downstream? Because clearly partnerships can break very easily, they're very fragile. How do you maintain the robustness of a partnership like we are talking about here?
Over communication, and I can't stress more, over communication. Under communication will kill any relation. I do also believe that making sure the objectives are very clear from the very beginning, and also understanding that in any partnership there will be rough moments. That's nature, okay? I mean, it's like client. I tell my clients there's always that Saturday night that you go to sleep and you say the project won't work, and then you wake up Monday and everything goes well. So I think those are the key. Alignment is important also in front of the customer. The customer has to understand the partnership, has to understand the alignment, and has to be part of it. You cannot hide the partnership from the customer, try to buffer it. The last point is, and I think this is crucial, when you have problems, you don't discuss the problems in front of your customer. The same way husband and wife should not fight in front of the children. If you have issues with your partner, take the customer out of the loop, solve the issues, and then go back. Right. The moment you're fighting in front of the customer, the relation goes bad.
Right. Richard, you make some very interesting points. And I come back to the first point you made about over-communication. And I agree, communication is a fundamental element to a relationship. But isn't there a danger that you have overload of communication? Sometimes the overload can create confusion and misdirection. How do you balance that equilibrium between what is relevant communication, what's just noise to keep the momentum going?
Well, I think it's a little bit lessons learned and experience with different partners require different levels of communication. Right. But also you need to have clear responsibilities of who is communicating. In a company that has thousands of employees, you could have 5 people dealing with the partner. Right, because you know they could be involved in 5 different projects. So there's a difference between the project communication and the overall relation with the partner communication. Okay. And that has to be very clear. If it's a project communication, then it should be done by the project team. If it's an overall communication, then it's done by the partner alliance team. You should not mix those two. Again, it becomes complicated if you do that.
Clear, very clear. Okay.
So guys, like we started out by talking about the evolving business landscape, right? We've now got we're in the midst of COVID-19. We hope to be out of this. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but you know, with this continuously changing business landscape, technology solutions are on the cutting edge. So how do you ensure that developing and strengthening of partnerships can deliver the best and timely solutions. That means from a Blue Yonder and Smartlinks perspective, but also if you are a customer looking at engaging a vendor, how do you do this?
I think speed is at essence now, Raymond. The first thing that COVID taught everybody is, as I said before, nobody wants to wait 3 years for an ROI. ROI now is 4 months, 6 months. Nobody has a window to know how business will be in a year or 2 years. And I think that's a big advantage partners can give. They're local, they can react very fast. Also, it's very hard for me to understand what is the real impact in Mumbai of COVID-19 or in Sydney or in Melbourne. A local partner has that sense. He understands the impact locally and how that impacts the customer. My sense is obviously more from Singapore. I know what's in the news, but I don't really know what the people on the ground are thinking. And I think that's fundamental.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm starting to see some questions coming in, but just what about yourself, Vineet? What's your perspective on what Richard just said?
I think Richard, and in fact, that was the very reason we started Smartlinks, right? Being able to kind of respond with speed locally to the local setup. And the specific reason was APAC and India, where we kind of focused hard on to build those, I would say, even IPs, which make the implementation faster and resulting in faster ROI that Richard was pointing towards. As no one is going to wait for a 3-year ROI now, everyone is looking to kind of get the money back in the first year itself. So speed and agility is of essence actually in today's world. I cannot have a long implementation cycles and setups. I need to have the first go live of the project, say, in next 3 to 4 months. And that's where the local part of it, right? Since I understand the APAC region and my team understands the APAC region, what happens is that we can do that faster and better. So that's where the partner brings in his edge.
Okay. So we talked about communication, and then Richard said over communicating. And then Joe asked the question about how do you balance that? Because sometimes over communicating is also not the ideal scenario. So then we talked about getting that right mix, yeah? Communicating well, but not overdoing it. So I'm an end user, I'm a potential customer that wants to use a Blue Yonder solution. What can I do to manage this partnership governance in this fast moving and high pressure situations that we're in now? What do I do as a customer engaging Blue Yonder and Smartlinks? What do I do?
Yeah. So there are two elements, right? Let me step a way back, right? When we, and what works for us, and sharing it from experience, right? Typically, if a partner is involved from a business case and an ROI stage itself, which is like the sales process itself. So what helps here is the customer is to get a unified view of how things will span out when it goes down the path of delivery. So that's very important as a customer to make sure that the partner that is getting involved is starting from day zero. Which is even the RFP process itself. Now, once I have done that, I would rather put a governance structure, and there are very standard governance structure that BY and the partner ecosystem puts in place and has been very strongly defined by BY, where it has been defined to the extent of a very strong RACI matrix, or it goes down to the point of how the cadence will be there between the partner, the customer, and the SI or Blue Yonder as well, or if there are multiple parties into that game. Now, adhering to that structure becomes quite a bit important. So when Blue Yonder or Smartlinks comes, that structure is already brought in place, and customer usually can further add on top of that structure to make sure that the governance happens properly.
Okay. Amran, can I ask you, because obviously you are dealing direct with the customer, even if you have a clear technology roadmap and you are clear on your objectives, which are absolutely fundamental for success of a solution, there are complexities in the organization, in a project. Customer changes the mind, there are new ideas, maybe sometimes things are not clear. What are the fundamentals required to address complexities in supply chain, but also variations in supply chain to ensure the partnership stays robust and on track?
Yeah, just to take on where Vineet left in terms of early engagement, he said from stage zero, the partnerships should be engaged in the sales process itself. Taking clue from what we did in the early organization in Ford when we deployed the Blue Yonder products, and as Smartlinks, Vineet and his organization actually was the implementation arm of it. After the project was implemented, and just to quote an example, after the project was successfully implemented all across Asia Pacific and South America and Middle East and all, and when we were talking as Ford, we were sitting to discuss about next 2-3 years of strategic initiatives, digitization initiatives. Blue Yonder team from Singapore, from Chennai, from Bangalore flew in. Vineet flew in from Bangalore. They sat with us. When they have nothing to do with us in the sense because their contract is over, their deployment is over, and they can as well leave. They sat with us for 2 full days and what we say as the now, near, far strategy in Ford Motor Company. So they were an integral part of the now, near, far strategy discussion. And for 2 days, 48 hours, it was extensively debated, discussed, and we came out with a kind of an action plan where Blue Yonder may or may not be part of it in future, but Blue Yonder is so invested in Ford in its interest as if that they felt it necessary to be part of our long-term strategic development and gave us that insight of an industry solutions provider. That I think is a wonderful example of how selfless a deliverer can be and not looking anything in return. And what it does for us as Ford or as a customer, it builds a huge confidence and a huge leap of faith on the organization, which so selflessly came and sat with us for 2 days when they could have just, gone because their contracts are over. Yeah. So that kind of a symbiotic relationship right at the base is so important there. Right. Two-way process.
I'm not going to understand that, but I'm trying to now reconcile what Richard said earlier on, and I'll bring Richard in a moment on this, that Richard is saying that speed in rollout, ROI of 4 to 6 months now is the name of the game. You just said, no, you're talking about 2-3 years, you're talking about different steps. How do we achieve this fast ROI turnaround? Because traditionally...
Both are true.
Sorry?
Both are true. So you envision, and this is a problem. Think about you own a retail business. If the vaccine isn't effective next month, your retail business will look one way. If the vaccine becomes effective only in a year, your retail business will look different. But you don't know how it's going to look. So you need a long-term plan because you need to understand the variations long-term. But when it comes to execution, you need to execute short-term plan because you don't really know which of your long-term plans are going to work.
Right. Okay.
So one of the things we did in the case that I'm not mentioning is really sit down and whiteboard 3 years from now.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you're doing it smart, you whiteboard with the vaccine, you whiteboard without the vaccine, and you whiteboard with the vaccine sometime in the middle. That way you covered your bases. Right. But if you're saying, I want to deploy a solution, we don't know if the vaccine is available. So really you need to then bring it back and build a 4 or 6 months ROI that fits your plan.
Right. Okay.
And in some cases, Joe, you may know that one of your plans won't work.
Sure.
As you may be building a warehouse for -70 degrees for the vaccine, right, and the vaccine approved is ambient. It's a risk.
No, I understand that. But what I'm trying to say, so you've basically clarified the point. So to achieve an ROI of 4 to 6 months, you have to have the big picture, the scenario building, the model, the roadmap defined. Only then can you achieve an ROI of 4 to 6 months because the ideas are clear in the rollout. So this long-term relationship, the partnership is fundamental to a fast success and rollout. That's what you're saying. Very
absolutely.
If I can also, if I just, thanks Richard for that. And if I just can also add, if you see what I mentioned now, near and far. So it has the now element, which is 0 to 12 months. Right. 0 to 6 months, 0 to 12 months. It has the near element, which is, up to 24 months. And then the far, which is kind of 2 years and beyond. So it's not just far, it is also now. So it looks into all the image. So what COVID taught us, for example, is that we have great, as Ford Motor Company, we're having thousands of suppliers all across. We have great information about tier 1s and at the most tier 2s. We have no information about tier 3 to tier X. So that's an immediate realization that we need to digitize the entire supplier base. So that cannot wait for 3 years or 2 years. That has to be done within the next 6 months.
Sure.
So how to digitize the entire supply base so that tomorrow, if there is one more COVID or one more tsunami we have to hit, we know exactly which supplier belt we have gone on a switch off mode, and as a result, which of the 4 plants need to be go on a switch off mode, and which of the plants can continue to work, because
Sure.
the database clearly shows that certain suppliers are affected. Today, we don't know which supplier. So today, we don't know what we don't know.
Clear.
That was the biggest realization.
Clear. Very, 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 very good points there, Amlan. So Richard, let me ask you a moment, because this partnership, as you described, is a long-term with short-term benefits and rollout speeds. How does BY empower, Blue Yonder empower their customers in the journey to innovate their business model? Because if the customer does not play their part in innovating their business model, change their mindset, their thinking, we can't achieve the success points in the project and the partnership relationship. How do you empower your customer or enable your customer to innovate?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues there. One is through education, showing what other players in the world are doing, show the value that other players are doing. And this plays more in certain regions, South Asia, India, maybe less in Singapore, depending on the sector as well. I mean, some sectors, Singapore is very advanced, some sectors not. But education plays a big role, okay?
Right.
The second one is showing the customer, and this is really common now. We sometimes get requests where the customer will define a vaccine will be found, and he will do his plans that way. Part of our job is to say, wait a minute, stop. I could sell you that solution, but really, is this really what's good for you?
Right.
Have you thought about A, B, C, and D? And that may look counterproductive, because at the end of the day, we're trying to sell a solution. But also, if we sell you a solution and that fails or does not bring value to you, you will not be a happy customer. So
Right.
part of our job is also highlighting alternatives that you can think about in terms of automation, in terms of transportation, and hopefully you will see that value.
Right. So it's also having the courage to tell the customer when he's wrong, and sometimes people don't have that courage to tell the customer they're wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, gentlemen. So Ramon, I come to the point where I'd like to invite you to take any questions from the audience if they are coming through.
Yes, there are. There are a couple coming through.
Please go ahead.
And as always, I don't know why I get messages on WhatsApp as well from participants. But anyway,
Please go ahead.
we've got one. So we've talked a lot about ROI, right? Used to be 3 years, now it's 4 to 6 months. So Richard and Amlan, I'm going to put you gentlemen on the spot. 2 points, just 2 brief points. What are 2 things that we need to do in a partnership that will allow the ROI to be realized sooner by the client? You've already said communication. 2 points from each of you. Richard, you go first.
Understanding the ROI does not necessarily mean only dollars and cents. Resilience, environment, there are many other elements to what's a true ROI. So the cheapest solution may not be the greenest solution, it may not be the most resilient solution. So you really need to understand the value for the company. I think if partner and we understand that, then the relation will go very, very well.
Okay, so understand at the start what ROI really means. So not just hard savings, and this is cheap, and this is your return on your investment, right. But also maybe the less tangible as well. Good, great.
That is correct. Principally in a sector that's highly used of transportation, highly used of energy, waste of packaging, waste of food. I mean, you see now a lot about food wastes being up to 30%. That has to be something the industry as a whole has to target. It's not one element, it's the entire industry has to take over the responsibility against that.
You must have been watching Channel News Asia last night. Yes. What about yourself, Amlan? 2 points.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I would like to repeat that for a provider, solutions provider, it is so important to penetrate the ecosystem of the customer and be an integral part of his problem statements, understand his grievances and gap points. Once you understand that, in its very understanding lies the solution. So when I was in Ford, I was not so much ROI driven because I always saw ROI as a byproduct. of the right decisions that we have jointly taken. But is the solution answering my grievance, is putting me a step forward in the competitive world? And ROI always, because if the ROI with BY doesn't come, I will go to, say, an Oracle, or I will go to, say, a SAP or XYZ. The ROI-driven strategic solutions perhaps may not be the right one. Answer your grievance and the right solution, pick the right solution and pick the right partner, and the ROI will be by default a byproduct of it. So as I said, ask the right question and listen to the question very, very carefully, and the answer, because the answer lies in the very question, the way the client is formulating it. So it is a symbiotic relationship. And trust me, at least as long as I was in Ford, ROI driven was not our concern. Can you transform our digital environment in such a way so that I can take a leapfrog into what I am today? For example, the problem that I mentioned about COVID, it has taught us that you have no idea about your supply base beyond tier 1 or tier 2. Now tell me, what ROI can at all justify for what ROI would be good or bad enough to go or not to go for a solution like that? It is a must, right? So ROI driven perhaps is always not the right thing, but when you understand the customer's grievances, ROI will come by default.
I also think, if I can add, Raymond, sorry.
Yes, please. Yes, Richard.
We also have to be very careful not to go down the rabbit hole of political discussions, of political points of view.
Right.
I've seen a couple of companies taking decisions for the, and I'll make a simple one: use masks, don't use mask. That should not be a political decision. Companies sometimes go down that rabbit hole and they start making decisions that are not based on facts, or just based on politics. And I think there's a tension point has to be played there. It may make sense in some cases, but you really have to see, am I making this decision for the right reason?
I think that's a very valid point. Just going back to what Amlan just said, though, I'm just wondering how many companies actually take that sort of an approach, that, it's not about ROI or tangible or intangible benefits, but we want to leapfrog the market. And that's why we need to have this visibility to our tier 2 suppliers. Interesting point. I'm not just sure how many companies actually see it that way, and how you're going to convince your investor as well. When I say your investor, your finance function.
The supply chain plays a big game here. If you do IKEA, you cannot use wooden pallets. IKEA won't let you. You have to use paper pallets. It makes a lot of sense, except if your warehouse floods, then you have big problems. So what I'm trying to say, the supply chain is also forcing companies to adapt. It's not, and I think these big companies have a big game play here, because they can force the entire supply chain to be more resilient or more environmentally friendly, because they have that power. But I agree with you, Raymond. There are companies. I know companies and friends that think that once COVID is gone, world is back to where it was before. We went back traveling. We're going back. So, and I can't say they're wrong. I don't personally believe that, but different people believe different things.
Yeah,
that is correct. That is absolutely correct. So you're right. Some companies will flourish, and some companies will unfortunately suffer the consequences of making the wrong decision. We just don't know which is the right decision right now.
For sure.
Yes, Amlan. Sorry, if I just can half a minute, it is at the end of this whole discussion, I personally, having gone through and experienced in a very complex auto OEM environment, I personally feel the larger share of the success of such projects lies with the customer leadership. Because if I, as the customer leader who is actually having the strategic viewpoint or the vision in front of me, if I falter in that vision, or if I dilute or corrupt that vision, then the whole chain of things, my engagement with my partners, selection of my partners, everything will have the same corrupt imprint as if. So it is very important, and I feel singularly the leadership who is actually taking the call for a transformative change has much bigger responsibility than perhaps Richard Ryan in this case, because Richard at the end of the day would follow pretty much what the customer can say with the limited advices. So it's very important for the leadership to stand up and do the right thing.
Okay, so that's that's very interesting. So we can now come to another question here, and I think, Amlan, we can carry on this point. The customer experience is all about the solution and tools deployed, and you've been saying this all along. We've got to give the customer what he needs, not what he may think he wants. And this is also what Richard has said, that it's important that we meet the customers based on fact, not on fiction or wish or whim. So I know you've shared some already, but can you share an example of a success story to illustrate some of these points very briefly, Amlan, where it's important that we give the right solution to the customer, not what he thinks he wants, but what he really needs, and how do we actually leapfrog the benefits into the market?
Yeah. So the example, if I can give an example of after having successfully launched in the Ford Asia Pacific and Middle East and South America environment, the Blue Yonder solution, and centrally from a Chennai Center of Excellence, we're driving the whole network logistics strategy, planning, and all. The success of that, and we saved millions of dollars in the process. Seeing the success of that, Ford North America and Ford Europe, also there was a paradigm shift of a sort, and they realized that why are we having 3 different supply chain teams sitting in Europe, North America, as well as Asia Pacific? And if this can so successfully work in with the help of the tool, why shouldn't the whole Ford Motor Company turn towards a COE model? And they started doing the quick business case preparation. And the revelation was data revealed that it's almost 50% reduction in the structural cost if the entire Ford Motor North America supply chain is done using the BY tool sitting in Chennai, just like Asia Pacific is doing. So that is the scale of the savings that we are talking about. So the one success story brings and reveals other opportunities. And the beauty of the partnership is because the partnership, there is an absolute 100% comfort level between us and the Blue Yonder and the in-between partner of Smartlinks led by Vineet. That confidence level spills over into other regions, unintended other customers, which is in this case Ford of North America or Ford of Europe. So you see the partnership, the philosophy of partnership is so valuable, is so large that it can take care of. That's why I was saying ROI is too small a thing, too narrow a thing in this large, beautiful ecosystem where you kind of spill over unintentionally to the rest of the world.
That's great. That's absolutely perfect. So, Vinny, can I bring you in, because you've been a bit quiet at the moment. So, again, talking about customer experience and the solutions and the tools deployed, what are the recommended milestones to sustain a successful achievement of a project or a partnership relationship?
Yeah. So the milestones are pretty important, right? When you're working in a tripartite environment where you have the original software provider, the partner who is implementing it, and the customer itself. So if I were to talk about, again, this is, I would say, a broad guideline. The milestone, I would say, now as we go ahead and actually look into the new paradigms, right? There are elements which you are doing on a continuous basis. For example, I would say, I would not even call them milestones, right? Conference room pilots. When you're actually working with your customer, right? You want to give them actually the feeling of the solution much earlier in the game. You don't want to go ahead and build to a point and then show it to the customer, Blue Yonder as the OEM software, and then you suddenly realize that this is not what the ask was. So I would rather say that, right, there is a continuous process of where you are letting customer visualize the solution, as well as the software OEM validate the solution in parallel. So that's one thing that is very critical, and that's what we have seen works very well in an environment where you are facing at times, right, a changing set of requirements, or where the whole environment itself is changing. So that's one of the key. There are standard milestones like where you want to kind of audit the solutions with the software provider, where they kind of say that, okay, it looks all good. And you can have those standard milestones, which are very standard ones. But I would say the conference room pilot, where you're letting customer and the whole ecosystem visualize the solution, is the key milestone, or I would say key continuous process that one should follow.
Which in fact follows on from what Richard said earlier on about over communication, alignment of objectives, looking at sustaining the relationship and addressing any grievances or any issues that we have in disconnects. That's great.
We also have to be, just to comment, Joel, sorry.
Sure.
We also have to be conscient that in these times, you sometimes have to throw all the plans in the air. We have customers that transport the PEP from China to the US. We have customers involved in transporting the vaccines.
Yeah.
You can't go to them and say, sorry, I don't have a consultant available for 2 months. Can you please put your project on hold? So it does require, and we have done it, where we just basically bring consultants from different projects, explain to the customers what's happening, and explain to them that sometimes you really have to stop to do something else, because that's what the world is asking from you right now. And
So
I think that's important.
So
That
it's
is correct.
responsiveness, immediate responsiveness, and reactive to the requirement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
That's
So
great.
let me jump in here, Richard, because we have a question from participants as well. It is related to ROI. Okay. Because you've got that flexibility, you're willing to jump in and solve the problem. The question is from Ashok, and he's asking, by working with a partner like Smartlinks, right? What's the ballpark savings that a customer can achieve, that can look at? So if it's using Blue Yonder directly, and instead of using Smartlinks, this partnership that you have, what sort of a percentage?
I can give you 2 data points. A typical Blue Yonder project across the region would have up to 30-40% of travel expenses. Okay, flying consultants all over the world to the ground, paying hotel, paying air tickets. If we go to India, we lose a day to go, a day to come back. So all of that time has to be paid some way by the customer. Even if you're not invoicing him, that cost is hitting the customer some way. The second point is, so this is a significant savings for the customer. The second point, which I think is as big or bigger, traditionally we work with international rates, which are more American and European rates. It's hard for us to compete with Indian rates or Thai rates, because it's just different market sense. Partners tend to hire locally. They tend to become much more closely to local rates. The final point is that we work around Blue Yonder products. That's our specialty. But sometimes the customer needs something from a different product. The partner, because he's not only Blue Yonder, he can go and pick a different solution and say, you need a local solution for delivery in Bangalore. We have this local guy that can do it. We can do the interface and do it. We, Blue Yonder, don't have that flexibility.
So if I had to put a number there, no, really great answers. If I had to put a number there, because someone's asking for a percentage, what would you say?
30 to 60% cheaper if it's done by partners, if you include expenses and all the costs. I'm not talking directly rates and hours. I'm talking the overall cost of the project. I would say in most countries, again, it will vary country by country, but in most countries, you're seeing between 30 and 50, 60% reduction in total cost.
Impressive.
Here's another question then, and this is just for any of you panel members, yeah? People come and go. Now perhaps with COVID-19, people come and go a bit faster because companies are upsizing, downsizing. How do you manage or ensure these partnerships are maintained, these crucial partnerships are maintained, when the key people who establish the partnerships leave the organization? How do we do that?
My point, and I'll let the other guys then talk as well, sorry. My point would be by having multiple contact points, both on the partner organization and our organization as well. So as Smartlinks, I work a lot with Vineet, I work a lot with Amlan, but I'm not the only person that works a lot with Vineet and a lot with Amlan. If I for some reason I'm not available, there's probably 3 or 4 people that can fit my shoe immediately. The same thing is fairly reasonable on their organizations. If Vineet's not available, I can talk to Amlan and vice versa. And there are other players as well. It's to ensure that you're not having a bottleneck of one person to be the whole contact point.
Very practical, very practical answer, Richard. I mean, makes perfect sense, right? Amlan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. From a customer point of view, as I again go back to my original statement, it's very important to have the customer leadership to be rightly focused and build a versatility in the team. So in Ford, the core team which was involved in the Blue Yonder product solution deployment quickly diversified and built that versatility, and we have a versatility matrix so that if the manager is building, second in command and third in command, so we ensured that thing. So as a leader of the team, now that I have left Ford for last 2.5 months, and after I have left very, very complicated markets of Brazil, and Argentina, Brazilian Ford Argentina has gone live, that too in COVID situation remotely, and it has gone absolutely flawlessly. Goes to show that if the leader focuses in building versatility in the team, this point can be very easily tackled. And I think Richard pretty much said the same thing, that he has multiple layers and backups beyond him.
Let me add to that a bit, Raymond, here, right? So if I were to look at it, right, from a relationship standpoint between a partner and a Blue Yonder, right? As a partner, we have access to almost everything what a Blue Yonder employee would have from a solution standpoint. So if I may not be there in the organization, but say someone lower down in an organization can also call up, access materials or take help and support from the Blue Yonder ecosystem. So at some point of time, because of the structure in place and over a period of time as the partnership matures, there isn't much of a difference between, say, a partner and a Blue Yonder employee, if I were to say. So that is so much ingrained, it need not be dependent on one person. It's actually, the team is so intermeshed. So no one needs to go through me to call Richard for a solution advice. They can directly pick up the phone. And let me make it a little bit, I can ping a Blue Yonder person over Teams actually directly. I don't need to have a mail or, so the communication has been streamlined.
The communication is there, and there's the technology tools in place as well. Great. Moving on, Joe, back to you.
Yes, well, if I just can pick up the point, Vineet, you make a very interesting point, but the relationship that you've built with Blue Yonder is one of very strong partnership and very strong trust. This is quite a unique relationship. I don't think we can see many of these type of very close, trusting, direct access, sharing of resources, etc. So I think you're describing a very, very interesting relationship. Did I get this correctly, Vineet and Richard? Is this right?
Yeah. Yes, that's perfectly correct, actually. Yeah.
So I think Vineet also said earlier that he used to work for Blue Yonder, so there's probably that continuity in the relationship as well. Yes,
and this is one of the factors of a partnership is that trust factor, apart from all the communication, everything else we're talking about. Gentlemen, it's great. Time is running short, so I need to start wrapping up here. So if I can really start asking you now, how would we? What are the takeaways from our current situation? Moving forward, how do we sustain partnerships? We talked a lot about various angles, but looking at 2021, looking ahead, looking at the horizon ahead of us, what do we expect? Same as this year, continuation, or do we see a breakthrough in the way we're doing things and some real benefit coming out from the struggles we have experienced in 2020? Richard, can I start with you? Because obviously you have certain views on this.
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's a conscient that the world has changed. I think by now, you know, using masks is normal. You leave the house in Singapore, you put a mask on. You don't even think. It's not. It's an afterthought. So I think we are now adapting to the realities, good and bad, of what's happening. And I think we learned a lot. I think we learned that we can do a lot without traveling. In my case, last year I probably spent 10 days flying to India for 1-hour meetings and flying back. It's a nightmare, completely useless.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we learned a lot. We learned we can do a lot of things without having to do. We also learned, and I think for the supply chain, this is a very important issue. We also learned that pursue for the lowest dollar option may not be the best option for the company. Right. Those mega factories that you have one factory producing for all the world, that's not good for the world. And I think everybody understands that now. We may disagree in what the solution is, but I think we all agree that pursue for cheap, reducing costs is not good for the world. And when you rethink it, that's a moment you can rethink it in a more positive way.
Yeah. Richard, can I just come back to another point? Because you also mentioned the power or the benefit of having local partners. So we're moving away from centralization, more to decentralization, more to local resources. But doesn't this also mean that you have got to have new skills in the organization to manage these relationships? Because you are clearly a very experienced person, you know how to touch all the touch points, but people come into your organization, you have to have a different balance of people. How are you addressing this going forward?
I think it's a little bit of learn, and there are cultural influences as well. Americans are very good working remotely. They never need to know the other person. Japanese, it's extremely hard to work remotely. They really want to go out and work. We have people in Blue Yonder, which their skill was going out, having a beer, entertainment, and they develop incredibly good relations. That's very hard to do now.
Right.
So I think everybody's having to relearn, Joe. And I think organizations, but also the people, they have to relearn how to balance that. I think for some, it's been very difficult.
Right. Great. Can I ask the same question to Vineet and Amlan about this decentralization? Clearly, your customers now need to change their way of thinking, need localization, need to have this leveraging. What sort of problems, I mean, apart from Blue Yonder, where there's a very, very good relationship, but looking at your other customers, how would you expect them to change their engagement skills, the people skills? Where do you see these pressure points now really important for people to address, Vineet?
Yeah, so Richard has kind of hit the nail on the head, right? As he pointed out, there were different skill sets and everyone has to relearn actually. There was an element of meeting in person versus meeting online. Those elements do kick in, but let me actually take it from even solution aspect of it, right? Now, you're talking about decentralization. You're talking about that you will not have one mega factory. You will have factories spread across, or you should have set up where you can actually quickly look for alternate sources of supply or services.
Right.
Now that means that you have to do it at scale and you have to collaborate with multiple parties, which effectively means for some of the customers who were more manual, they need to switch to something which is more digital and which is self-orchestrating.
Right.
Now the skill set in a manual setup was required was I pick up a phone, I call this particular supplier, get the work done because the base itself was small. Now the base has exploded.
Right.
So what we are looking at is now a way or a mechanism of thinking, and that's where the people need to reskill, is that do I have a platform where I can push my requirements and it gets orchestrated in a fashion that suits my supply chain. So the thinking goes from operationals to strategic and tactical, where the heavy lifting is done by the tool or the digital tools that we are seeing versus and the strategic and tactical thinking. So the skill sets are now changing. You are moving from a very operational background to a strategic and tactical. So most of our customers that we see are kind of embarking on that particular journey where they are bringing in these kind of platforms to do this whole orchestration. And obviously the results of it is that people are learning new things with this set of platforms.
Excellent. Amlan, you also mentioned about leveraging on a different model. You were talking about looking at the best practices. That one of your experiences was in centralized manner, not decentralized manner. So we are here building a solution on a decentralized platform, but then we're applying the solution on a centralized platform. So there's a mixed type of thinking here and mixed skills. What is your take from a different angle?
That's right. Yeah, actually, you should talk both central post-COVID. The world is changing. Some are feeling the need for centralized. Some are feeling the decentralized warehouses so that they can reach out the last mile much quicker as against a mega warehouse. So both changes are happening simultaneously. The need for us, the likes of the Blue Yonders and the likes of Smartlinks, what we need to do in 2021, as the original question was, that we need to be extremely agile, extremely versatile, and we should be in a position to simultaneously kick off multiple customers, clients, and projects, which we are expecting in 2021 to come, because as soon as COVID opens, there will be a rush of digital transformation because people would carry the scar of a COVID and we can't afford to have another COVID-like situation, lockdown. So there will be flurry of projects coming towards us and how we can have, multiple deployments at the same time, quick, agile and all. So yes, the world will be centralizing at the same time decentralizing. So there will be a lot of hybrid changes happening and we all have to be mentally ready for it. But the good news is the digital tool that we have, which Blue Yonder has, that is rock solid. Right. So that's not affected by COVID. It is how you go and sell it, how you implement it, how we tweak it. All of this discussion that we are doing is around a rock solid product called Blue Yonder, so whatever XYZ product. That is very important.
Interesting. So you are saying that basically the tool is robust and rock solid. Everything goes around it is dynamic and flexible.
Exactly.
Okay.
Can you imagine had COVID come when the world was not so much digitized?
Sure.
It would have been a disaster of a much bigger scale.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We all agree with that. All agree. Ramon, I think we have really covered all the points. Any final comments or questions from the audience at all? Anything they would like to answer? Because I think it's been a very, very productive discussion.
Yes. No, I think it's been very good, Joe, and nothing else from this side.
Right. Okay. So Vineet, Amlan, Richard, thank you so much for a very, very interesting discussion. Of course, there's a lot more. We can talk about. Richard, do you have a comment?
No, I was going to say thank you very much. I was just saying I really appreciate your time and appreciate the time of everybody in the call and the other panelists. So thank you very much.
Great. That was excellent. And again, you've left us with many thoughts about the future, the agility, the speed, the relationship, the trust, the communication, the tools, centralization, decentralization, and many, many ideas that we've talked about. This gives a big opportunity. This is all positive. And the winner will be the one that is the smart mover and moves ahead. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. I wish you all the very best. Happy Diwali to all our Indian colleagues, and stay well, take care, stay well, and all the very best. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Joe and Raymond, for organizing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, gentlemen. Have a great day.